What is going on? You are listening to TAGSPodcast, aka Talk About Gay Sex Podcast, celebrating 7 years of podcasting. This is 582. I am your host, Steve V, and in this episode, we are talking to Dr. Goldstein, the good doctor himself, with his brand new book. But seriously, you need this book. It is for all of our health concerns with our bums, proper cleaning out, health, gut health, stories from Dr. Goldstein himself, personal stories. I really enjoyed this interview and reading this book, and I think you will too. That is coming up shortly, but we also want to remind you to grab a tier over at our Patreon page, because when you do, there are just 3 tiers, and when you grab one of them, you are not only supporting Tags Podcast, but you're getting extra special sexy perks like commercial free, access to our Discord channel where you can talk to us during the week. You'll also get things like a bonus episode every month, and there are more perks coming your way. All you got to do is go to patreon.com/TagsPodcast. That's patreon.com/TagsPodcast. And let's get into my interview with Dr. Goldstein with his brand new book, But Seriously. Okay, well, I couldn't be more excited to have the good doctor, Dr. Goldstein, Dr. Evan Goldstein, on the show with his brand new book, But Seriously. Congratulations, Dr. Goldstein, on But, B-U-T-T, Seriously. Love the title.
Oh, thank you so much. Thanks for having me.
Absolutely. So this book is so great because it could be a coffee table book. It's a reference. But I think the thing I was really surprised about is we learn a lot about you. You divulge a lot in this book, especially early on, even about your sex life.
Sure.
We'll talk about how the book's divided in a second. But what was that like? Was that a conscious effort to talk about even your sexuality, how you approach it, bottoming even? You had an issue, I think, at one point.
Sure. Yeah. I mean, I think just like you see with your podcasts, how you start to kind of feel more comfortable discussing your own issues, and we've spoken about some of yours and this
Sure.
and that. I think it was just necessary. You know, it was at the point in my life where I've finally came to terms with not only who I am, but my ass, and right. Let alone like the science behind what we're doing, 15 years later into this, craziness of the anal world. And the reality is that that when you relate to people and you're more personable and you divulge the information of where I am in my anal world, right, it becomes interesting conversations. Yeah. So I felt like it was necessary because people come into my office and constantly are telling me their issues, and why not make people aware of where I am and where I was and how I'm working on it and how every day is trying to seek that pleasure.
Well, and you relate it to the podcast in a bit too, because we do this on this show all the time. No one's going to want to hear about if we just comment on sex that's happening with other people, but not with our own personal lives. No one's going to relate to it. So I find the book as much as a reference manual, as much as this personal journey that we learn about you, which is really great.
Oh, thank you. Yeah,
absolutely. So the book is divided into 3 sections, and I like how you did that too, because part 1 is the bare basics. Part 2, you've got going all in. In part 3, aftercare. Why did you decide to, structure it this way?
Yeah, I think, the first was to really look at the myths and the taboos, right? Yeah. This is not just a gay book, right? Even though we've learned so much from our communities, but it was more of like everyone's got an ass and everyone should be into anal. Yep. And the reality is that many people want to, but they have preconceived notions. They have the taboos and societal stigmas that says, if I play with my ass, I must be gay. Right. Or I'm going to shit on someone. Or it should be painful and I should bleed. And there should be trauma associated with that. And like all of these things. So like in the bare basics, it was like, all right, well, how do we just like debunk all these myths?
Right.
recognize them, and then for everybody to kind of start thinking along those lines, and then to say, okay, now that I've kind of like taken on my own stigma, how do we now start to get into the nitty-gritty of understanding anatomy, and then understanding and breaking it down into simple terms with great visuals, and being able for people to really understand before we're getting into, hey, all right, now we're getting fully into everything.
Right.
And then it just streamlines to then saying, okay, not only did I set the stage for anatomy, we talk about going in with dilators and making sure that you're going slow and understanding the process. And then how do you get into sex from the beginning, full-fledged penetration, to then, okay, how do we start mixing up positions? We have a really cool peach scale. 1 peach is simple, 2 is a little bit more moderate, and 3 is more advanced for some of the positionings that we're seeing.
I think one of my favorites was the standing congress, which if anyone, it's actually one of my favorite positions. Haven't done it that many times, but with certain big guys.
Yes. Oh,
because
yeah.
essentially it's a guy that's holding the other guy up while you're fucking, and it's so hot, especially when you're kissing at the same time, because you're so face to face and it's super intense. But you said you could skip the leg day when you do that particular one. Is that an advanced position? I mean, other than it does take a lot of strength.
Yeah, I mean, I think it's an advance for both, right?
Yeah.
The person that's penetrating and not being. I think the key for me with that position is the penis comes out a lot.
Yeah,
it can,
right.
And then it becomes pokey, and then you can like break the dick,
Yeah.
and nobody wants that.
Right.
So I think, again, it's like, how do you first do self-exploration so that you're able to learn what your body is capable of?
Right.
A lot of this was like also written for people that don't have access. Like, we're here on 7th Avenue in New York, and you literally have access to everything.
Yeah, there's
right?
a free clinic
Totally.
for LGBTQ.
Everything, and access to this. But most people don't have access to this type of care and this type of education. So it was like, all right, how do we just like educate the masses? Right? And then if you don't have access, well, all right, I'm understanding my anatomy. I'm starting to use toys to figure that out, like anal dilators. And then like I'm running into some trouble. I may be bleeding. I may have like spasm where I feel tightness. And then you can start using the book to do the things that I would do in the office.
Yeah.
Like you see me in the office.
Oh, yeah.
And like certain testing and squeezing and all that is really great to get the numbers.
Right.
But the reality is that many people don't have access to that. And so how do you use toys? How do you understand your anatomy before you get into big Congress positions?
Yeah, right.
And then set the stage for that success.
Well, one of the favorite things about the book is that you talk about conversations that we should all be having with our general practitioner or a specialist, but that we don't have. And you debunk a lot of those myths that you really should be able to talk to your physician. And I know when I've been in the office with you, you get right down to, you want us to have what's going on with you, what do you enjoy in bed. And one of the things in the book is you really want us to enjoy sex, explore sex, but there's 2 functions to our asses. There's a functional side and there's a pleasure side. It's the pleasure side I don't think we talk enough about.
100%. I mean, I think, we did a study early on that said 92% of even gay physicians don't talk to gay patients about sexual issues.
Right.
Like, dude, it's crazy.
Exactly.
Right? And so, I mean, I think the thing is like, first you need to look at what desire you want. Right. And then it's also saying, well, how do I know if I haven't even explored? Right. And also desire changes and thoughts change. And then as you're experimenting, what you would think you would never like, you may actually like, but you never try it to actually know that, So I think sex and talking about sex, you should be able to sit with your physician and be open, literally, about like what are the issues. And the physicians, this is a great book for physicians all over that provide care as well, which is like, what questions should we be asking?
Right.
And what should be standard. And the reality is that sexual health, regardless, even if it's anal, is so important and so empowering for people. And you should be able to say, hey, look, I want to take dick and I can't.
Right.
Why? Well, why not? And then you start, or saying, hey, I want to take dick, but I want to go to fists and I'm having problems. And be like, what are those issues? I would love for it to be before you're actually engaging.
Yeah.
Where you can actually like learn before, so that you don't have to come to my office with the trauma.
Right. Well, on page 29, I loved it because you actually talked about what you're starting to see younger people in late teens and early 20s complaining of looseness or even rectal prolapse, which I didn't know what that was, but that's when the rectum, you say, slips outside the anus because 1, their anal muscles aren't fully developed and strong. 2, they don't know what they're doing. And 3, they know the mechanics well enough to experience mutual pleasure, but aren't educated enough to know how to avoid causing injury or a long-term damage. And you go on to say that you may be seeing more of this in your office in the future. You hope not, but yeah.
Yeah, I mean, I think, nobody talks about these issues,
Yeah.
right? And that's what we talk about also in the myths of like, will you get loose with anal sex? And run-of-the-mill anal sex, no, you won't. I think the extremes, we start to see some elements. Most of the looseness that I see is more trauma-related, like sexual assault and like bad situations to the crystal meth game where you just don't feel and it just gets beyond.
Yeah.
But with that being said, most people don't. I think the key is to educate people of like, if you are into extreme play, what can we do to prevent that? Right? How do you understand your anatomy so that you're able to be as loose as a goose as you want, to take whatever you want, but then the days that you're not, what are we doing at the gym to work with Kegels and squeezing? What can we do in the office to maintain that?
Yeah.
It's a muscle like anywhere else. The problem is a lot of the younger kids are not fully developed on the muscle, and the muscle is really elastic. So now they start having that extreme sex, and yet they don't have the muscle rebound to actually stay contracted. So again, I think it's just really more understanding that there are these issues, and like it's important to talk about them, and it's important for you to feel comfortable with your practitioners and friends and have resources that like are trusted, and that you're able to really look at the basics. I don't even think we've touched the basics in all of our lives of
Not
like
at all.
just the right way to think about anal.
Right. So in the book, which is really great, you talk about the 6 booty camp, your 6-week dilation plan. We'll talk about that, or tell me a little bit about that. But one thing I didn't know is you can have, if I'm saying it right, a manometry test.
Yeah. So a manometry test.
Manometry test.
Yeah. So anal manometry is basically measuring the pressures. People use it for issues with the pelvic floor. So some people, even with like incontinence and other issues. And we said, well, wait a second, why aren't we using that for our asses, right? Yeah. And so Steven, who's a physical therapist in my office, it's about a 20-minute test. He asks you to squeeze, relax, squeeze, relax. But we're able to understand that there's 3 camps of bottoms. The first is I can take anything whenever. And that's about almost 40% of people. And that's just like luck of the draw. So whoever's listening that's like, fuck, why didn't I get that ass? I'm sorry. It's
I
the
think
rest.
that's me. Yeah. It happened to be me.
It's you.
Yeah.
And then there's the other two other camps, which are camp number 2 is kind of like, I can take it. It doesn't feel the greatest. Some days are good. Some days aren't. And it's just like
maybe
there's a little
pain
bit.
at the end.
Yeah, there's like a little bit, or like the initial entry is not the greatest. But you're able to kind of like get through it. And then
that doesn't necessarily sound like a good thing.
No, not at all.
A day's of work.
Exactly. And then the third camp is like, it's off limits, or like, I'm so tired, I can't get it in.
I tried it once and it was like, forget it. Don't ever go down there.
Exactly. Yeah. And the nice thing about manometry is that you actually have numbers, right? And then I do a lot of stuff in the office with like dilating and physical therapy to anal Botox for relaxation to actually surgery. And so when you do those things, you can repeat the manometry study and start to see, oh, we're actually improving that. And where are we? And the same thing on the opposite side with looseness. So if someone is into fisting, like every 2 to 3 years, what we'll do is we'll repeat the testing so I can make sure that they're not going way too loose. And then to the other extreme where they can have problems with either gas incontinence or shitting on the street, which nobody wants.
Nobody wants.
Maybe, but
I don't think so. That reminds me of a story I heard recently at a place here in New York that's a sex positive space, and over Pride, somebody I think was having fun in the back room and totally was
Yeah,
loose
and it just like lost it.
sprayed, and they tried to clean the place up. But
man.
you talk a lot about in the book too, like victims of rape, or people that don't have the education. If you're not using lube and you're not doing proper relaxation, if someone just pounds in there like that, or maybe drug use could lead to something like this.
Yeah, I think the thing first to think is, the ass is set up as a shitting mechanism.
Yeah.
So what happens is that the stool moves from what's called the colon into the rectum. Right. And then it hits the muscle, what's called the internal sphincter, the furthest in muscle. And then it creates a reflex, and it says to your body, oh, you need to take a shit. If you're not at a bathroom, you're squeezing the other two muscles to keep it in.
Yeah.
But then, obviously, when we're having diarrhea or loose stools, you're like, fuck, I got to run, right? But that's because you can't hold that in anymore. But at the end of the day, that third muscle relaxes, and then you tell the other two to relax and then have a bowel movement. It's called the top-down approach.
Right.
But with sex, you're going from the down top approach, right? And so what happens is that those muscles aren't able to fully relax. And so what happens is someone just shoves it in. And then if it's not enough lube, if it's forceful, if it's a big dick and huge, you can lead to trauma where things tear the skin, the muscle splits. There's lots of issues. So the key with that 6-week booty camp was for people to understand the anatomy, but you can learn how to relax and you can learn how to override that mechanism. So it's kind of like when we speak of, of the people that can totally open their hole to take you. Like we've all topped somebody that's able to like open, you stick your dick in and then it closes. And you're like, wow, this is hot. Most people can't do that, but you can learn how to do that. And that's what's really important with the protocol. So our booty protocol, we talk about using glass dilators. I started that company Future Method, the science of sex. And so I didn't see glass and I didn't see silicone toys out there that really were representative of the anatomy and what we felt was the right way to do it. So I said, fuck it, let's just make our own, you know? And so the dilators are glass because it takes any lube and they're super, super silky. Second is they're easy to clean.
Right.
Third is that the pressure of glass is really important to engage those muscles. Okay. So what happens with a lot of the silicone toys, it's so soft, you're actually not doing anything. And also a lot of people put a plug up there and they think, oh yeah, I'm dilating, but you're not. The muscles are actually around
gripping
the plug.
Around it.
Yeah, they're not actually dilating and opening. So the set comes as 3, small, medium, and large, and they're graded in a way to start engaging that top-down approach. We're doing it the other way, so you need to get the first muscle to relax, the second, and the third. And so a lot of people are like, oh, I just want to get to sex. And you're like, it doesn't work like that. That's where injury happens. The protocol is 6 weeks. 2 weeks of the small toy. Even if you think you can take bigger, you're trying to learn how to get that relaxation to happen. You're strengthening the skin. You're trying to make the mechanism really work. And you'll see that like every time you do it, you'll feel better. And it's like going to the gym. Give me 2 sets of 12. I mean, that's it. Obviously, if you're hard, you want to get off, you want to use it sexually, do it. But the key for me is learning the mechanics of how your pelvic floor actually works. And then you go, and then you go from small to medium, always starting with the small, and then I'm not going to tell you the rest. You have to buy the book. And then you'll see
it's a really good, you're a big proponent, you say in the book, about exploring this by yourself in your home when you have time, or the shower is a great place to do it too.
Yeah, I think that, you can't think that a top is going to just be able to do what they want to do without you actually understanding how your body works. I talk about like the book and what I do at Bespoke and all of this is like empowering the bottom. You can be submissive, but still be in control. Right. And that to me is like my huge mantra of like, if you know and you've done the booty camp and you know how to use the toys and you know your anatomy, you start to kind of like think differently about sex where you're like, oh, this position feels the best. This doesn't. Why doesn't it? Can I like move up on the dick? Can I move back? Do I need to use a pillow? What positions are the best for me? And you start to, and I don't want like the listeners to think that you need to become so medical because I
Right.
want you to feel sexy and have fun.
Sure.
But in the beginning, it's like, it becomes habitual. Like
Right.
if you train your body to like create certain motions in the right way, sex just becomes that much better. And then you don't know what dick's coming through the door.
Yeah.
You don't know if that top actually knows what they're doing. And so it's trying to set the stage for at least, and this is again for all you tops out there.
I was going to say, why is this book good for tops?
Well, I put in there a lot of top tips
Yeah.
to give tops to understand that like the topping is an art too, and like
Absolutely.
when you have a great top that takes it slow and understands anatomy and how to enter and the right positions to start with, it like just sets the stage for like amazing sex.
Yeah.
And when you look at what I see, injury from hemorrhoids and fissures and
Right.
fistulas and abscesses, it all comes to, a lot of it is improper, appropriate care, right?
Yeah.
From like, how am I douching, to am I cleaning out too aggressively, to am I not using the right lube, do I not use the right dilators before sex, what
Yeah.
positions, and you start to kind of like, well, I can prevent most of these things, right? Things are going to happen no matter what, but I can prevent things if I understand first who I am,
Right.
and then how do I put myself into positive sexual, situations.
Hey there, we talk a lot about sex on this podcast and have for 7 years. As much as I like to talk about it, I also like to have sex. But I like to feel confident when I do. I think we all do, right? I've played different roles in the bedroom over the years, and lately I enjoy being a truly verse top in the bedroom with my boyfriend and verse bottom for my OnlyFans just for fans. I want to be confident in all these situations, but I also want to do it with a product that I feel is safe, effective, and science-backed, especially being of a certain age. Our friends at Joy Mode have got the answer that I think we've all been looking for, that I've implemented into my daily routine, and along with my daily prep, essential vitamins, diet and exercise, and sleep, I've incorporated their sexual performance booster into my daily regimen. Well, what are the results? Confidence, harder and stronger erections, and more energy for things like the gym and, of course, the bedroom and life. It comes in a palm-sized packet like your favorite electrolyte powder. Stir it in to 6 to 8 ounces of water 45 minutes before sexual activity and watch the magic unfold. Literally, not only is this the only supplement you'll need in the bedroom, but it also supports your blood vessels, cardiovascular health, athletic performance, blood pressure, and more. This, guys, is my favorite part. Even on days when you are not having sex, you can take the sexual performance booster to boost things like nitric oxide in your body, which not only supports your erection quality long term, but also increases blood flow circulation. Who could not want that? This allows for your cardiovascular system to pump blood more seamlessly and effectively into the areas of your body that need it, whether it's during workouts, sexual activity, or your regular daily exertion. So here's the best way to make this happen. Get their 30-pack, which comes in a perforated box, perfect for your supplement cabinet, pantry, or bathroom vanity. And it's the perfect 1-month supply. Support your erections, athletic performance, heart health, and overall quality of life with Joy Mode. Whether you're in the move or traveling, our compact sachets are easy to pack and take with you. I just did on my last trip to Portugal. Get a Joy Mode boost anytime, anywhere. Redefine your intimacy, guys, and go to usejoymode.com for 20% off with the code TAGS, TAGS. That's 20% off and free shipping with the code TAGS, TAGS, at usejoymode.com. Great sex solved naturally. And you mentioned we could switch. I've traditionally been more of a bottom, but now in this new relationship I am in, I'm more the top.
Sure.
And so I come from a background of knowing what I like and how to slowly, but I look at my partner more, and it's
Totally.
and you say that we should explore. Our sex is going to change throughout the years, and I think that's really important.
I think I say a lot to tops because if they're coming in for just anal issues, I'm always like, Are you a top because like that's your MO and that's it? Or are you a top because like you had a bad experience, it's painful, and most of the time people are like, yeah, you know, I've had it once or twice and it's just not
wasn't for me.
Me. But I'm like, is it because of the pleasure side or was it because it was painful? And most people are like, yeah, there's something that is restricting. There's something that's limiting, right? I always say the best tops are bottoms.
There you go.
You know, because if you know the right way, and I'll probably get some people that be like, no, and that's true. But you're right. You may be such a great top,
right?
You know, that you understand and you're able to. But again, it's experience that allows you to be like, oh, this is the muscle. This is how I get things to relax. And this is how I set the stage. And I think, you know, facing each other, you know, is there grimacing, you know, being vocal.
Yeah.
Like I don't see the fisting community in my office that much because they're amazing.
Oh, yeah.
Right? They talk to each other. They know when to say no. They know when to
limits,
stop.
safe words.
Totally. And so I think that's we can learn so much from that to start to say, how do we just normalize all of this so that every generation has access to this type of education, this type of care. And then if something goes wrong, that was where we talked in the book, that like aftercare side, which is like shit is going to go wrong. Right. And how do you know like what's I can deal with at home versus, and most people are ashamed to go to the doctor. Right. So I set the stage in the book. I remember when we were thinking about writing, we were like, you know, should I just talk about all ailments and then all the, appropriate treatments? Or should I just like lump everything to say, all right, if something happens, what's the first 3 to 5 days of treatment? Right. Because most people aren't going to go see their physicians. They're going to go to Google. They're going to be like, oh, fuck. They're going to freak out. And so it's trying to set the stage of like suppositories and lotions and doing some baths and making sure you're checking in to every day should get better over the 3 to 5 days. And if it's not, then like, is it an STD? Do you need to see someone? Who are you going to see? And again, a lot of that empowerment is like, if I am engaging, who are the people to see and communicate to on a professional level? You may have the best sex experience and have the best whole, but something at some point is going to go wrong. And how do you make sure you have access to that care? Because everybody should.
Well, the book's super empowering because hopefully you get to a point where you can avoid, you're not seeing us because we've taken the correct measures, but things can arise. And that's why, at least if you know a little bit more, I mean, one of my favorite sections is the whole pooping section. I learned so much on what I'm not doing right. I mean, you say things like, you know, sit in ergonomical chairs. If you're sitting at the office all day, you work from home. Sometimes I'm editing a lot. I'm on the couch and things like, you know, hemorrhoids, which are really just veins I learned about. Everybody has them. It's just they can flare up. And the way we poop, only go when you feel you need to. Don't this idea where you bring your book, even if it was your book, to read the whole book on the toilet seat is not a good idea. Why is that not a good idea?
It's all about pressure, you know, and when you talk about shitting, when you talk about sex, when you talk about going to the gym and squats, it's all about how you disperse the pressure. Right. And if you're sitting too long on the bowl, the body only knows the mechanism like we spoke about of shitting. So what'll happen is it'll send more and more blood to that space. People come in and like, oh, I have hemorrhoids. I'm like, yeah, everybody has hemorrhoids. Right. They're there for a reason. Symptomatic hemorrhoids, I'm bleeding, they're prolapsing, they're clotted.
Internal,
those are different. Yeah. And it's all about that pressure. So the mechanism is, I feel like I need to go shit. I'm going to go to the bathroom. Right. When I sit down, I need to force it. No, I want to open those muscles and breathe through it and allow for everything to evacuate. But the longer you're sitting, the more blood goes, the more the hemorrhoids get swollen, the more that they can cause those issues. And so the old adage of shit and get off the pot, it was from that, which is really smart. And I get it. Like, and everyone's like, oh, I want to shit before I go to work because I don't want to poop at the office, you know, or I don't have what I need to clean and do it. And it's just like, I get it, but your body is really smart and you have to really listen to that, because if you can't poop, you're going to force it. And then what happens with force? more pressure in the space, more hemorrhoids. You can tear. It becomes a problem.
Or you hold it in, which you talk in great detail what that can do as well.
Totally. Right? And I think it's fiber and pre and probiotics and setting the stage. All of this is how do you shit appropriately so that you can bottom better, right? And we all know when our shits are off, it's like game's over for a lot of things. You just don't feel right. The ass, even though it's like what you think is not truly that important. It's like when it's off, just from a pooping perspective, it's terrible, right?
Yeah.
Now think about how it limits from a sexual perspective. So I always speak of gut health versus butt health, right? We're all about butts, right? But with that, it's like if you don't have gut health, you can't work on the butt health. So it's all about, appropriate fiber and supplementation and pre and probiotics specifically for anal. And then how do you just like get yourself into a good routine that allows you to shit appropriately? No
and
Instagram.
Everyone's different.
Yeah, no Instagram, no Facebook. I know we all do it, but it's literally like, oh, I feel like I need to shit. And 30 seconds or less, it should come out your ass. And if it doesn't, stand up, walk around, drink some water. Why stand up? Because the blood leaves the mechanism, So now it leaves, it resets the stage. And then if you feel like you got to go, sit back down and go again. I also tell people to wipe standing up. I was on Stern Howard not too long ago because he always stands up after to wipe, and he was like, oh my God, this Dr. Goldstein, he's so smart. He's like, I've been telling people to do this for years, blah, blah, blah. But it makes sense because not that I want you to shit on yourself when, if it's dripping and all that stuff, wipe a couple. But when you stand up, the mechanism stops, right? The blood goes away. A lot of people will bleed with hemorrhoids and then they'll just sit on the bowl and it keeps bleeding and it's bleeding. It's like, no, the second you stand up, the muscle closes, it clamps down, it will stop some of the bleeding. So the book goes over a lot just for people that necessarily aren't into full anal, where it's just like, how do you eat correctly? How do you shit correctly? How do we like just talk to our kids about the right ways to
not engage in that? You're not a fan of toilet paper.
Yeah, I mean, bidets are great. Stay away. We spoke about wet wipes. Stay the fuck away from them.
Oh, yes, exactly.
All of those companies should be banned, but it is what it is. They're making millions of dollars, and most listeners are probably supporting them.
Yeah, exactly. Why, once again, though, because I have a friend that swears by
I know.
He loves the wet. I don't use them, but...
Yeah, I mean, I get it. And I don't know, is it the solution? Because they'll all be like, oh, this is like hypoallergenic and non-toxic. Is it the solution? Is it the fabric? Is it moisture? But I see herpes outbreaks. Like if I see, let's say I see 90 people a week, I will say like 15 to 20 of them are because of wipes. Wow. And it's all like, especially in our gay space, in our anal, because most of us have herpes type 1, most of us have HPV, and it's all in response to the microbiome. Mm-hmm. So if your microbiome changes, whether from douching, wipes, what happens is there's good bacteria, there's bad bacteria, and they are in equilibrium. The wet wipes, the moisture, the fabric, it fucks with that.
Ooh, okay.
So now you can get fungal infections, bacterial infections, you can get herpes. I see warts from it, and it's all from that. Yeah. And so it's not like the one-off person. It's more of I'm using them every time I poop. Yeah. And then you're going to start to develop issues. And first of all, it's also terrible for the environment, especially like here in New York. Yeah. All of the pipes can get clogged from it. Sure. And it's just terrible. So I usually tell people to stay away from it. Yeah. I'm a big bidet fan. Pop in the shower. You could sit. I did one where I just sat on my sink and washed my ass. I mean, you could do so many different things. Whatever you want to do.
Get creative.
But the reality is that there's much better ways from a hygiene perspective. Also, showering at night. So many people don't shower at night. Right. And I get it. I mean, it just depends on what culture and how you were brought up. But think about it. If you shit in the morning and you go to Starbucks and you poop, and then like you're living your day and you're sweating, and then you're at the office, and then you just get right into bed. Yeah. So it's like, think about that. And especially the ass is a place that sun doesn't shine. There's no breathing. So it's like, even if you don't want to do a full body shower, just clean the hole.
Right.
Soap, water, get back there. With Future Method, we do an anal exfoliant and a soothing cream. But you want to get back there in appropriate hygiene. Sleep naked. Let it breathe. Don't always wear underwear. Because you want to aerate that space, especially in the summer. Right now, it's like 100 degrees outside.
Right.
You're literally sweating all the time.
Yeah.
Think about if you're now festering and sitting in that all day long.
Well, it's interesting. I've taken your advice on showering. I do that now, but also I take my fiber pills.
Oh, at night.
At night, like you've mentioned before, and it does bulk it up, and then in the morning I release it.
Yeah,
and
most people poop in the morning, and so the nighttime fiber I find works well. Also, as we all get older, we pee a lot more at night.
A lot, yeah.
And so what happens is because of the fiber, it pulls the water. Instead of it going to the urine, it pulls it into the stool. So you may see that you're decreasing the nighttime wake up, go take a pee type of situation. So there's lots of benefits as it relates to that.
Because you really go over also STIs and how they, the anal region is very thin, that skin around there. There was a recent article where on HIV Awareness Day, the Biden administration was encouraging people to not only get tested for HIV, but also to get tested for syphilis, which is on the rise, and Hep C. Now, I'm going next week to get my test and my swabs for my throat and my ass, which you talk a lot about that, which is very important. But is Hep C something that we should be testing for regularly?
So I think that, it's clearly the answer is yes, especially in certain city populations where things are much more on the rise. The good thing is that, I don't really see a lot of that just because for me, it's more of like anal specific chlamydia, gonorrhea, syphilis. One thing we speak about a lot is like make sure they're doing all the right tests, right? Oral swabs, anal swabs, urine check, and blood work.
Right.
Also, I'm not a huge fan of I get it. There's a lot of these testing places. But I've seen so many people do the online and then they get a negative test and then I see them and it's positive. And you're like, what the fuck? And it's not easy
or the finger, I've had to prick myself and blood it was just like, who died here? And I couldn't get the blood in the little teeny vial. And it was like,
it's not as easy as people think. And also, I'm a huge proponent of testing for herpes routinely.
Yes.
People don't. And I see so many people that come to me, chlamydia negative, gonorrhea negative, syphilis negative. And they're like, but I'm still having pain. And then literally I swab and it's like a herpes 2 outbreak.
Right.
So really be cognizant of that. And that's where the empowerment is to make sure that like you're telling your physicians, even if they're not, be like, no, I want this and really get into a good space to understand that. With the Hep C stuff and the syphilis, we're seeing a lot of rise, but I'm seeing a lot less with the DoxyPep, which is great, which I've been doing for a long time, but now it's much more mainstream where a lot of people are doing the post-exposure of potential STD, where let's say I have sex Friday night, it's a random grinder, I don't know who this is, unprotected, what can you do? Well, you can take 2 pills of doxycycline within 72 hours. Most people do 48 hours. I don't want you to do it, let's say I'm getting fucked Friday night, I take it Saturday, I'm getting fucked Saturday night, I take it Sunday. Most people are grouping it to like once a week. People are like, does it fuck with the microbiome? We're not seeing that.
Oh, great.
The reality is, think about if you had a positive test, you'd be on 7 to 21 days potentially of antibiotics, and then how many people you've infected by the time you found that out. So a lot of this is really great stuff. So make sure.
Is
what
I'm taking daily, and that seems to be not having my herpes come
outbreaks.
back. Yeah.
Totally. And so there's lots that are out there that I just think people don't know or they don't have the right information. And a lot of this was just to say, hey, we have one life. Everybody should take the dick they want and have as much fun as possible.
I love it. You say towards the end of the book, there are people who will object to this book's existence, who will say that it's dangerous, but the real danger is ignorance. I love that statement.
Yeah. It's super amazing. I mean, look, even in our gay space, right, I see people not wanting to go there in the conversation. And it's interesting, I mean, I think that the precedent should be that you are you should be able to do what you want. Who are we or anybody to talk about kink, desire, and especially anal and put a label on it that is a stigma to say you can't do that.
Yeah.
It's bullshit, and I think having just that awareness to call out that, to then say, well, wait a second, this is important to me. And then it may not be now,
Right.
but I see, 40s, 50-year-olds where they either lose a partner or they're, getting divorced or they're changing and they're like, well, I want to be relevant. And
Right.
I've never bought them before. How do I do this? Sex is ever evolving, and I tell people all the time, the hardest part, I think, is to create comfortableness in uncomfortable situations.
Yeah.
And it's not that uncomfortable needs to be painful. Uncomfortable just means to be it's outside of your norm.
Right.
But you wouldn't know. I tell people all the time, I have a friend who is I hate mushrooms. And I'm like, well, did you have Daniel Boulud's mushroom? Did you have Jean George's?
Okay.
Did you I don't know, is it all mushrooms? Or maybe it was how it was prepared. Think about how many people don't eat or do things
Right.
because of one experience that they're missing out. And it may be, hey, this one wasn't working out, but it could work out in other ways and get your pleasure to the point where you're like, fuck, I never even knew that existed.
And there's so much pleasure in your ass.
Totally.
That is so great. The book is so inclusive too, particularly at the beginning when you talk about this book is for everybody. You dispel myths that, Asian men can't be tops.
Totally.
And what was that about? Was it the patients that you were seeing that you really wanted this to embrace everybody? Because like we said, the ask is very pleasurable.
Yeah, I see 90 people a week and do 10 to 15 surgeries, and I've been doing it for 15 years.
Wow.
So you see every body type, every ethnicity, every phobia, everything. And so the key was, again, and it's so interesting, even today, a client came in and you first see the person, so your perception always goes.
Sure.
Right?
Yeah.
And so you literally have to kind of say to yourself, okay, don't let my mind go into that. Let's see what that is. And I remember it was today was a total bear, scruffy, crazy and this and that, and amazing and so fun. And then you start to listen to what type of kink they're in and what they're into, and then your preconceived notion is no
Did
way
not
that
match,
didn't match.
Right.
But then you start to realize that there's so much variability,
Which is beautiful,
which is so
and amazing. Yeah.
But I think that was the purpose of calling that out,
Yeah.
which is to say we all have to kind of stop that,
Right.
And we actually, if you go one way, you need to consciously say to yourself, well, wait a second, it may be A, B, C, D may check for what my preconceived notion is, but D, E, F, J, and what does that mean? And then it changes, and we just need to be accepting of everybody, and just be ownership of yourself and how to set the stage for success.
It must have been a lot of fun writing this book because, when you're seeing your patients weekly, you just mentioned all that you do every single week, 90 patients, surgeries, that we could see a different side of you, and it's very humorous. You're very funny.
Oh, thank you.
You make this a lot of fun and engaging. What was it like for you to, sit down pen to paper and get this out?
It was a fucking pain in my ass. I've never written a book before. I had to learn a whole new industry. And it's time consuming. But I just felt it was so necessary. And it was, there were definitely points where I was like, fuck this, I'm not finishing this thing.
Yeah.
I'm out. But when you start to kind of put everything to pen and paper and the chapters start flowing, and you start rearranging, and you start to be this was the butt Bible that none of us ever had, and even if you look at Gay Sex and some of the other books, it doesn't get into the detail of anatomy and the real understanding of how we function.
The function,
anally. And so I just felt it was just necessary.
Right.
And because I can only see X amount of people, and people fly from all over the world, it's how do I just now really reach the audience for prevention and access to care, and really making sure that people are able to have something to be okay, I do want to engage in this. How do I now do it in a funny, cool, chic, amazing way and allow people to have that, 24/7 all over the world.
Yeah, put it on your coffee table.
Totally.
The name is cheeky, but seriously.
It's a good gift for all your friends.
I love it. It's But Seriously, the definitive guide to anal health, pleasure, and everything in between. Dr. Evan Goldstein, thank you so much.
Thank you,
always,
Steve.
this is great. People can, of course, follow you
Yeah.
at Bespoke Surgical
Yeah.
and The Future Method.
Yeah, perfect. So Bespoke Surgical, The Future Method, But Seriously has its own, butseriously.com. You
It
can
does.
check
Oh,
that out.
great.
And then my Insta of Dr. Evan Goldstein. And then, I hope you all read it and get it, and wherever you can plug it, literally plug it.
Yes.
Because I think the world needs this, and I appreciate it.
Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Well, can't say enough about this book, but seriously, you need to get it. It is such a good reference guide, entertaining and really good to learn about our bums a little bit more, our butts. So check that out. We are back with Tags Live this Wednesday. Cody, Maurice, Doggett, and myself. Again, don't forget to grab a tier at our Patreon page with extra special sexy perks. You can go to patreon.com/TAGSPodcast. You can follow me on the gram. I am _Steve V, or go to my Twitter account. New content coming this week, which is of my Just for Fans and Only Fans. Go to @TAGSPodcast over on X or Twitter. And in the meantime, continue having hot, gay sex.